Okay, we are live, and the big story of the week is Gabriela Fundora, who I think deserves to be a main event fighter. And that was kind of my big takeaway is like, how is she the co-feature when it felt like kind of the fans came out for her? She delivered an electrifying performance once again. She fights Alexas Kubicki. Kubicki took the fight on short notice, talked a big game, came with a game plan to win, and then once again, great fighters do what great fighters do, which is she just thoroughly dominated, took the fight out of her opponent. And I think that to me, it's like Fundora and Ella Scottney are the most consistently impressive young women's fighters out currently.
I couldn't agree more with that. And it's like, there's some perspective, right? Like if Gabriela Fundora is on the, Canelo Crawford undercard, right? Like she's not the main event of that card, but she's generally speaking, I think to what you're saying is like a fighter who can carry an event, a fighter who can carry a card. And I think there's no doubt about that. And it's no disrespect to Oscar Collazo, but I don't see how he's the main event over her. Like, what about him as a main event fighter that she isn't? And I think with the differences in their performances, right, kind of mirror that sentiment, I think.
Yeah, I mean, the other thing I saw was it's like she has ties to the Coachella Valley. The fans came out for her performance. This is someone, let's just be honest, in women's boxing, we don't see a lot of stoppages consistently. She's on a 3-fight knockout streak as a champion. You know, she won her belt. She won her undisputed title stopping a champion. And then this year has gotten 2 stoppages. She's kind of the next era of something really special in women's boxing. It's pretty apparent that that's what she is. And it's just kind of strange that after she fights, the show isn't over. That's just kind of my sentiment. Is like it feels
She's
like
a
that's
closer.
the send
Yeah,
off.
she's a closer, especially on a card like that.
Any thoughts about her going down to 108? You know, Sarah Bailey got knocked out by Evelyn Bermudez the same night. I don't think it was televised. That's an interesting fight. I thought Sarah Bailey was a very solid fighter from the most valuable promotions cards that I had seen of her. But it's hard for me. I think 115 has some names that kind of get me excited when I was looking through, but really, I mean, I think with Fundora, between the power, the size, the frame, we're kind of in Inoue territory where you just have to hop weight classes until you find a weight class that interests the fan, because I think we favor her over so many fighters.
Well, like for the reasons you said, her frame, right? She's like 5'9", 5'10". She uses her range. The people say she doesn't use, her feet or she gives up her height. I don't really agree with that. I feel like she keeps her punches long, but she's a front foot fighter. So because she's not on the back foot, like exclusively behind a jab, she kind of gets maybe an MO that her brother used to get a lot more as well, and his I think was deserved. But for all the reasons you said, her frame, her height, her ability, her punching power, just seems like the trajectory is upward in weight. I wouldn't see. I don't necessarily get why she would go down, and why that would benefit her long term.
Just, I think it's another belt. I think we're looking at someone that could win 6, 7, 8 division world champion. And I think as a young age,
100%.
maybe go down, get an undisputed title, get a belt, multi-division. I think that's really the point of it if we're talking about it. But I mean, I think that there's a stereotype that fighters who are aggressive that make the fight. And in this fight, she had a lot of David Benavidez qualities to her, where she's like smiling while dishing out pain to someone. And that's like, to me, this performance really reminded me of Benavidez versus David Lemieux, where it was like a solid, and ironically, they're both Canadian, solid opponent, but it was just like she enjoyed so much beating up the person she was in the ring with. And I think that maybe some people look at someone that's trying to force a fight, trying to land damage as, oh, she doesn't know her range. I think she's
But that's part of why she's getting the knockouts, right, Lukey, is because she's getting the full extension on so many of these, long straight shots. And then when she, sits down on an uppercut or a hook, she's always kind of in the right position. She does get hit, but she's not, the way she's going about her work is not reckless, and it's not that if she was falling in, she wouldn't be getting these knockouts.
Well, I also think like a guy I think to compare her in this fight, I saw a lot of Benavidez things where it's like, okay, you can say Benavidez gets hit, but who wants to stand with him? So a little bit of what she's doing is she knows. I think that she's even better defensively than she is, but she knows that her damage and the accumulation of shots that she can put forth really can tire a fighter out. So I think that at times she'll put herself in 50-50 exchanges knowing that she can break someone down. To me, the big thing is that impresses me is she can fight at range, but she can shorten the shots and still be effective. And that's something that tall fighters often struggle with. She's good in both ranges. And that's something that I think is slept on. People, I don't know, I've stopped listening to people because like the analysis some give just are either kind of tropes of what they think smart people say, or they just say things that I think there's an element of truth, but they're not quite getting the full story. With her, I think she has great range and she sets the tone in the fight using her distance, getting the snap. But I think she walks you down and breaks you down, and she can shorten or round the shots, which I think are just as damning because now you don't want to be at the end of the shots, but you don't want her to come forward because now she's really putting the punches on. And I thought that it was a good stoppage. I was getting a little concerned with the amount of damage Kubicki was taking because it was starting to get into that area of her body language, and the way she looked just didn't look like she was fully there, but she was unwilling to say she wasn't.
And that's why somebody's got to save the fighter, right? I mean, I did kind of feel like there was that stretch, right, where she was kind of looking at the corner, and everyone's watching the fight thinking everything's so intentional, but maybe she's just kind of spacing out and looking to see, like, is somebody looking out for me or what, whatever. She looked like she was in distress, though, for sure. And I think that Fundora has also got this pace. She's got this engine that it's going to be very difficult for anybody to keep up with. And that's why I think it's the going down in weight. I get the other title, of course, right? But there's titles to be had in every weight class, because I see somebody who could be successful at featherweight and junior lightweight.
Very much so. Our guy Jesus Sam, saludos. I love you a lot. Gave you a wave. That's probably Dakota's burner account. Want to get into Collazo now?
We can get into Collazo.
Okay, well, what did you think of that performance?
Listen, bro, I just I feel similarly about him as I feel about Kenshiro, where it's like I enjoy his fights, and I think that there's traits of a potentially great fighter there. But at the moment, I don't see the defensive instincts, and I don't see honestly the athleticism or the explosiveness of an elite level fighter, or even of like a Chocolatito who, wasn't a defensive wizard by any means, but knew how to, responsibly be in range. Also, am I frozen?
You are 100% frozen.
Hell yeah, bro. Let me refresh that real quick, and you take over for 30 seconds.
Okay, I'm going to take over. So for me, Collazo has always been, should he be a pound for pound fighter? Should he be on my pound for pound list? Which I know most people go, why the freak do you even care? Why do you care about pound for pound lists? I
Back
care
in biz, baby.
Because it's like relevant fighters. I care about who should my attention really go to. And Collazo had been really interesting because he's a power puncher. He's a lower weight guy. Merged about 2 or 3 years ago with Golden Boy Promotions. Kind of made a name for himself in a weight class that really rarely has fighters that we see broadcast in major televised cards. They're cards that you often have to go off the beaten path. You have to really kind of have a serious boxing addiction to know who the 105-pound champions are, or really have a deep knowledge of it. We don't know a ton, right? But like, he really was someone that had captivated my interest, and I started to wonder, is this guy? To me, after this fight, I've lost a lot of enthusiasm about Collazo because it looks like guys that are as big as him or bigger than him are going to always be an issue, because the thing with him is it looks like power and size is a big part of what brings him to the dance. And I didn't see the level of thinking I wanted to see from him. It was a lot of brute force. It was a lot of break you down. Didn't see the adjustments. He got hurt to the body with a good shot.
He got hurt a couple of different times, Bob. Like I really was surprised. You know, maybe we've mostly just kind of seen him beating guys up, right? He's had little moments where he's gotten hit, but he's just been better for the most part. And he was, for me, much too hittable for a guy to be in a pound for pound conversation. That was always my issue. Again, that was always my opposition kind of to having Kenshiro in that conversation, is when I look at everybody else on the list, he's just much more hittable, and that vulnerability is kind of played out over time. And especially when I'm watching the lower weight guys, man, I'm kind of looking for a pace. I'm kind of looking for a speed thing, and I don't see that with Collazo either.
It's like a middleweight. He kind of fights like slower, labored, and I think that, to me, Kenshiro had much more of a wow factor to him. Like, it was like more special.
Yeah, offensively, there was more of a wow factor with Kenshiro.
Like with Kenshiro, it was like pretty obvious his defense was terrible, but there was like a Navarrete wow factor where it's like, this is really unique. It's kind of like a blender. With Collazo, maybe it's an off night, but this really, and then the stoppage was pretty weird. It's like the corner stops it. It felt like a competitive fight. Maybe the broadcast felt like it was a competitive fight. Really a strange stoppage. It's like the first round, Vayson maybe isn't like in the fight. They stop it halfway through the round. I don't know. I wasn't thrilled with the performance. I thought Collazo took a huge step back, and I thought that it didn't do any services that Fundora had a flawless performance in the co-feature. Like, if this was the co-feature and Fundora sent us home, I think it would be less of an issue. But the fact that this was the main event fight, and it was basically a competitive fight against a guy who had fought at a heavier weight that we were unfamiliar with, and he went life or death with him, you know. And by the way, the first round stoppage was the first round knockdown was I thought it wasn't a very good call. You know,
it's kind of a wrist punch. Yeah.
Yeah,
listen, bro, I think we have more proof of Fundora's ability. Like, as much as we don't know as much about the lower weights, I think we know more about some of her opponents. You know what I'm saying?
Oh, she's more proven.
Like the Christina Cruz fights, there's a couple of fights in there where we know, you know, she's in with some real ones, and some fighters that have accomplished some stuff. And I don't know as much about the Collazo opponents, and I feel like maybe that's a piece of it.
Yeah, I mean, it is something. Golden Boy undercard, what stood out to you?
I love me some Joel Iriarte, bro. I think that he's tremendous. I only got to see highlights of the undercard fights, unfortunately, but he seems like somebody who's on a real trajectory. It seems like the maturity and just it when I watch him is impressive.
So I'll kind of add my thoughts. Also, Jesus M. Vayson was game. Vayson landing hellacious shots. I think he meant hellacious.
Did, man. That's why the stoppage was surprising, right? I mean,
yeah, it just felt premature,
a little out of nowhere.
Yeah, it just felt, and then I think the stoppage hurt the fight, because then it's like Collazo had a hard fight. It was 50-50. You want to see him battle back from some places, and then he's celebrating like he caused the stoppage, and it was just a strange stuff. It was just a weird performance. Iriarte to me reminds me of Jose Ramirez 2.0. More like maybe like very similar to how Jose was coming up. Interesting, when I spoke to him before the fight, he was talking about being fast-tracked. Two inspirations for him are Diego Pacheco and Vasyl Lomachenko. And he brought up how they both fought good opposition early in their career. I think you just see that he's a very confident fighter that wants challenges, you know, and when he doesn't have those level of challenges, he kind of treats the opponents the way he views them. So it was just like a very professional, get this guy out of the ring with me, let me move on to better fights. I think Gael Cabrera made a leap on this card. He fought Judy Flores, who had gone 3 rounds with Michael Angeletti and had gone 10 rounds with one of the Maloney brothers. Stops him in 1 round. I think that's a good performance to be like, okay, that's a guy. Thought 2 guys kind of stepped back for me. Ruslan Abdullaev fought Kevin Johnson, who also gave Iriarte a tough fight.
He's a
But to
tricky
me,
guy, bro.
he is a very tricky guy. He's a great gatekeeper of this generation. But to me, with Abdullaev, 3 or 4 fights in, seems like he's got a lot of, like Sergio Mora was saying, a lot of Beck the Bully traits of loading up on big power shots. There's not a lot of stuff that I see working at the highest level. There's a lot of Bektir Akhmedov. It looks like he's going to be capable of going to those 10 to 12 round fights, but is this a style that I think dominates that division? Probably not. To me, this really said like he's an 8-round fighter and he needs to stay there for a second if he wants to build. Very cautious about his trajectory at the top of the division. And then who's the other fighter that I'm blanking on? Had a performance on this undercard where I was like, that's interesting. And there was opening the card, there was a female fighter I hadn't heard of who got a very good win. So let me pull up these 2 results because there's one other. Oh, Grant Flores. Grant Flores was in with Courtney Pennington. Pennington, an older veteran, and Flores is someone I'm high on. And I think of him as like a power puncher, break your will guy. And maybe he was going for the 8 rounds, but it kind of surprised me that the fight went 8 rounds, given that Pennington's 38 years old. It signals that Flores is an interesting up-and-comer, but he's also someone that's going to need some development. To me, I was kind of expecting maybe a stoppage at some point, even if it was a late round. And then let me tell you the undercard fighter that the female fighter in women's flyweight who kind of stood out to me. So her name is Adriana Pinero. Got a win over Gloria Munguia. Munguia's has taken some good fights. That was, to me, a noteworthy fight because here's a fighter undefeated, jumps into a real fight at or around that weight class. And, that weight class of Fundora. And it's like, I had never heard of her, and she just beat what I would consider a top 6 fighter in the division. And that's her debut. So, let's go to some of do you have anything to add?
I think, generally speaking, I'm wondering, who do you see as the opponents for Gabriela Fundora to kind of make a legacy?
Thank you for asking. I actually queued this up in one of my other tabs, so I really appreciate you. I think one of them is Mizuki Hirota at 115 pounds.
That's the first one that I think of, but I don't know if she's at that level. She's a fun character and she's really good, but I don't know yet.
I think that's the fun of women's boxing and boxing in general is we need to get away from how does this fighter stack up and just go, let's make some fights. And I think that's a fight. I think Jenny Fuchs is an interesting character in that because she's a Olympian. She won a title. She beat Adiela Ruiz. I think she's an interesting character. I think at 118, who stopped our friend Sharetta Metcalf?
Chernica Johnson.
She's an interesting character, and I think the big super fight for me, if the weights ever work out, is Fundora versus Ella Scottney. I think they're just the 2 best of this generation of women's boxers that I've seen. And if the weights can work, that's the super fight. So those are my thoughts.
Yeah, it just seems like the interesting. I just think below like 118, she's just going to be better. And what she's going to have to do to get challenging fights is move up a little bit in weight.
I think Yoka is really underrated for how good she is.
She's tremendous. No, yeah, she's tremendous.
Could give her a fight. And I think because she dresses like a model and stuff, people kind of label her as not the fighter she is. She's a I don't know. I just feel like she gets written off as like not as talented or acclaimed as she is just because I think also because it's women's boxing and people probably don't watch it as carefully. Or Kim Clavel has fought at this weight class. She fights this upcoming weekend. We'll break that down. Maybe that's someone that can be a character. I think there's probably more interesting big paying fights around 108, possibly right now. But I think Hirota and Ginny Fuch. But see, the thing is, Ginny's getting older. So if they're gonna do the fight with Ginny, that fight needs to happen soon, because does she stay around for 2 to 3 years waiting for Fundora? Like, that's kind of the issue. So I think Hirota's one. Let's go to some of these comments. You guys should check out Christian Medina from Jalisco, Mexico. His last fight in Japan was so good and made him a world champion. We're sorry we didn't talk about that fight. It was a great fight. It's hard to watch these Japanese fights, especially without the ESPN deal, where you can't really go back. And maybe next week, me and Dakota will do a deep dive on Christian Medina, since you brought this up, SD. Maybe that'll be our homework.
I've never seen him, so I'll have
let's
to do
do
a
it.
little
So
homework.
we're going to do a deep dive next week. We're going to do a Christian Medina segment out of respect for you bringing that up, and we will see what we got there. Martin Mulligan. Fundora family can fight, Lukey and Dakota. Yeah, it's pretty obvious that they can fight. And Freddie Fundora obviously has to be in the running for trainer of the year, right? He has to be mentioned. I think without a doubt, at least to me, Bomax the trainer of the year for the Terrence Crawford performance. Like, that's to me kind of obvious. But I think Freddie Fundora is kind of proving himself as one of the top guys.
Yeah, I think that he's definitely, there's a special sauce there. Is he like Benavidez Sr., where he's working with other guys as well?
Not really. No, not that I know of.
Yeah, I'm not discrediting him in any way, but there's like, dad trainers that are like trainers that are also training other fighters that have a career of their own. And I think it's interesting that he's 2 for 2. You know what I mean? Like, there's definitely, he's doing something right, because he's taken both of his kids and turned them into championship level fighters, and they've both gotten better as time has gone on. And I think that there's something that the mix of the whole family is like they're doing something right.
Mr. Ball, did you see Evelyn Bermudez stop Sara Bailey in Canada? I haven't seen the footage of it. I didn't know. I was actually doing research on Fundora future opponents, and then I saw Evelyn Bermudez stop Sara Bailey. I was unaware the fight was even happening, and I didn't realize the day I looked it up on the internet was the day the fight happened. So I haven't seen it yet. If you know how to see it, please let me know, because I haven't seen that clip. Sara Bailey is someone who I know had emerged kind of with those MVP cards, fighting with Lucas Body and stuff. And I always thought that she was like a really solid contender. Like, she was a strong physical fighter. And it was honestly shocking to see her get stopped in one round. That kind of was like and that kind of makes Bermudez versus Fundora, if that were to happen, interesting to me, because Fundora would be going down in weight, fighting a puncher in theory, and that would be at least a storyline.
That's one of those experience matters fights, I think, because Bermuda has been around for so long.
Yeah, I mean, we'll get there. Salita card. What did you think of the Salita card?
I thought Brandon Moore had a good performance, bro. I was kind of impressed with how measured he was able to stay, even though it felt like he clearly had this guy's number kind of from like the 3rd round on when he gassed out. But he just stayed within himself. He never put himself in danger and boxed a nice little shutout. And I think he's still obviously kind of a work in progress, but you do kind of see a contender skill set starting to form with him, where he's had enough experiences. He's fought enough different types of guys. I think he's gotten better since the Torres fight, and he can kind of do a little of this and a little of that now. And it was cool to see him stay measured for a full 10 rounds like that, even though the instinct is always to want the knockout, which would have been cool. That would have been a good statement. I just felt like I liked seeing him, stay engaged for a full 10 like that.
It was a mature performance. It
Yeah,
was
it
a mature
was.
performance, and I think it really spoke to that. Look, you can say whatever you want about Brandon Moore. 3 undefeated fighters in a row he beat. Skylar Lacey, Tough Cookie, Stanley Wright coming off the Jeremiah Milton win, and now DeAndre Savage. I mean, he beat 3 undefeated fighters in 1 year. Completely changed the way I view him as a fighter. I didn't really know where his trajectory was. Now I think he, at the very least, can be a contender for a good period of time. And I think the most interesting thing about him is he's willing to take challenges. He's not afraid of fights. He wants these good fights. He's a true competitor, and I think he's going to get better than some of the guys that had more accomplishments because of his willingness to take fights.
Right. And when you take fights, you're not going to be an undefeated guy. And I thought him taking Richard, who had so much more experience than him, was also a validating win for Richard, right? Like that's probably one of, if not his best wins at the
Him
moment,
and
I would
Guido
say.
were like his legitimate wins,
Yeah, yeah. And I just think that, like you said, he's got a willingness to make tough fights. He was already, he's calling out Anthony Joshua after the fight, which you have to love. Why, if you're gonna reach, why not reach really fucking hard and try to get, a big name to take you? I highly doubt we ever see that fight, but I like that that's where he's at, is he feels like, nah, I'm ready for these kind of world level fights.
We might have to get him on the show one of these weeks. He's an interesting character, and he's definitely interesting. I wanted to do a full segment on this fight. Kay Scott versus Olivia Curry. I think pretty clearly the round of the year is round 10 in this fight. This was just a classic beat you up fight. I think going in, I expected Kay to box and Olivia to kind of bang. What I didn't expect was Kay to bang with her, and what I also didn't expect was Kay to sometimes get the better of the shots. I'm not sure how you scored it, but to me, this was just the best fight of the weekend. This is really, really, I thought it was interesting because I'm not really. This was an example of 2 people who've put a lot of time into boxing, who maybe they wouldn't be on this stage, right? Because it's women's boxing, but they get the chance to be on this stage for 2 unified vacant titles. And what comes of it is people putting their heart and soul on the line. Maybe this is my last chance at it. And I thought that this is when, we see vacant title fights and they start to get monotonous. This is what I want from a vacant title fight, is like you got the willingness to win from both. I'm curious your thoughts on this fight.
I mean, it was a banger for sure. If I'm being brutally honest, it kind of lacked the traditional skill set of a title fight, right? But I felt like it had the spirit of a title fight. It had like the desire of a title fight. And clearly, I haven't seen much of Scott prior to this, but anything I've seen, I definitely have not seen her fight in this style. And definitely not against somebody that can throw the kind of body shots that Curry can. It was a hell of a fight. I felt like the draw was fair. I honestly thought that Curry at times did the more damaging work. Scott did the I think more eye-catching work, but it felt like Curry kind of did the dirty work, not dirty fighting, but she was throwing hard to the body. She made it physical. She was doing good work on the ropes, I felt like, as well. Even when Scott was, started pushing her back at the end, I felt like she fought well with her back on the ropes, and it seemed like a draw was very appropriate.
To me, what I loved about it was you got Scott, without me telling on her, is 41, deep amateur pedigree, and she didn't fight like someone her age. Also love the nickname Glamour. Very strange. Can we think of anyone whose nickname is that? And then you have Curry, inspired by Christian and Billy. Pretty obvious that's her inspiration when you saw how she fought. And you saw 2 different styles, 2 different people at points in their life. And when the fight got rough, they said, F it, let's just fight. And I get what you're saying, because I didn't see the quote unquote jab cross, the use of distance. But I think that sometimes that can be made up for when you see 2 people that really want to win a fight. And to see the letdown, not that it's good to see people let down or bummed, but to see two fighters that really thought they won the fight or really wanted to win the fight, and when their both hands get raised. I've said this to Curry's team, and if I speak to Scott, I'll say it to her. This has a chance to be a trilogy that's a fascinating women's boxing trilogy that comes out of nowhere that could immortalize both of them. I'm not saying it will, but every now and then you find the right dancing partner. And if this second fight, which they have to do, right, this could be a come out of nowhere trilogy where all of a sudden Curry and Scott become some names because they banged with each other.
Yeah, it's like a Friday Night Fights main event. It feels like it could have that kind of luster, that kind of rivalry, where it's like we know these are not the best fighters in the sport, or maybe even in their own divisions, but together, what they're going to be able to produce for us is going to be really special.
Well,
They are made for each other.
What makes a great fight great to me is two flawed fighters who have strengths, and their strengths play to the flaws of the other fighter. That's what, to me, what makes a great fight. And it's like Curry's flaw is defense coming in. She's just going to come at you. And it seems like Curry's got two options. She's either going to be too aggressive and come forward, or she's going to shell up and not throw as much to counteract those shots. Those are her two strategies. Scott can move, can box, and can punch accurately, but she also sometimes has trouble getting off the line when she's in combination, or she can, get herself into trouble putting herself on the ropes. The way the two styles matched up led to an exciting fight because what the other one did, Curry's physicality can lead to Scott's weaknesses. Scott's accurate punching led to vulnerabilities in Curry's defense. Really was a special fight to me. And I think that oftentimes, at least in the old school 10 years, I always think boxing's 10, 12 years ago, and it's not anymore. It's different. People would overlook women's boxing, right? Oh, we don't want to see this, etc. I'd like to believe there are fans that just enjoy a good boxing match. And if you enjoy a good boxing match, this is right up there. I don't think it's as good as Billy Martinez. Might not be as good as Brandon Adams, Boacek, but I mean, this is a top 5 fight of the year, in my opinion.
I don't know if I'd go that far, but I think that it's the kind of matchup that, and it was exciting enough, and a rivalry like that can only help, I think, to build the sport up, particularly when there isn't like an abundance of opponents at middleweight, right? Like there's good fighters and everything, but there's a chance for them to kind of build that legacy together at a lower level, but in the same way that Amanda and Katie did. Yeah,
I hear you. Mr. Ball, shout out to Mr. Ball for being active in the comment section. We really appreciate you today. I only saw TKO. Yeah, I highly rated Sarah Bailey. I thought she was really good too, and especially given I want to say she had a January, February, March type MVP card performance where Body fought, and I was like, she can fight. And we got a round table pizza that night, and that's always a big night in this household. Probably on the East Coast, you probably don't got round table pizza, bub. It was a great fight. Curry improved a lot since the Shadeja Green fight. I think the thing about Curry is, for maybe as limited as she is because she started boxing at 19, you can tell she works really hard. You can tell that she has no shortness of work ethic. And I think that was another thing too, because you could tell Kay Scott works hard, but she's also a lot more technically talented. And that was kind of compelling too, is a hard worker versus someone talented in kind of a weird matchup. But I really loved the fight. I'm not sure that you liked it as much as I did, but I really liked the fight.
I loved it too, and it was a great banger. Sometimes for me, particularly with Curry, like she's a little slow to the pull sometimes, and so for me, it was just fought at a skill level where I wouldn't compare it to Mbili and Martinez, but I can still appreciate it. You know what I mean, for what it is, and I would love to see them do it again.
Yeah, I just think that's also, it's like this division is just kind of in its infancy, and like But let's do a little tiny thing on my guy, Dimitri Salita. 4 different types of fights on this card. Developmental heavyweight fight with our guy, Sedarius Simmons, not Simons. He opens the card. It was an okay performance, not maybe the best. DeVell Smith gets a knockout. He's back with Sugar Hill Stewart. Then you have a women's vacant title fight that's a banger. And then you have Brandon Moore in a step-up fight. A battle against an undefeated fighter, keeps it moving. Anything stand out to you, or more so, how do you feel about Salita putting on these cards, kind of old school cards, different type of matchups on the cards?
I've been really enjoying them. I love the commentary team with Corey and Al and Raul. There's things about it that remind me of like a Showbox card, or some of maybe the Boxing After Dark cards. It fills a space at a certain level that I think is the sport, transitions in the way that it is. It makes it harder for up and comers and mid-tier contenders and developing fighters to get those kinds of opportunities, because every card is sort of built to be the same level from top down. And so I really enjoy it, and I think it's great for the sport.
What I like is it's obvious that they don't have these huge budgets, and they're developing guys on a regional level to get them as far as they can. And Dimitri's done a great job building fighters like Vladimir Shishkin, Ergashev, back to Jarrell Miller, to Jermaine Franklin. He has a way of finding paths and getting these fighters promotional opportunities and getting them to big fights. And I think that it's pretty impressive that now you've got coming up in a few weeks Joshua Pagan. He's in a 50-50 fight. You got Brandon Moore, who I wasn't sure his trajectory. Now I think Moore's pretty good. Salita is one of the best architects right now. I think that Salita and Aya the Tiger promotions have 2 of the best rosters that don't get any credit.
I think that's fair. Yeah.
I think they both are doing a great job within their means of building fighters. And I think that because maybe they don't get the big network polish and whatever, people don't look at it. But I think Salita's a lifelong boxing guy who really understands boxing, and he takes all of his experience into building young fighters. And I think that it speaks when I probably wouldn't have put Moore in some of these fights, but Salita had no hesitation. And now we look at Moore and go, this guy's a contender. And they're doing it, I don't know what his budget is.
You also have to take some risks to do that, right? Like, you got to be willing to put your guys in tough. You got to be willing to take Brandon Moore coming off a stoppage loss to Richard Torres and have him fighting multiple unbeaten guys. Now, we know the unbeaten thing is a little bit misleading, right? Like, this opponent wasn't in great shape. Obviously, he hit hard and was knocking guys out. But the undefeated thing doesn't tell the whole story. But it also, you have to be willing to take some risks as a promoter on your fighters in order to have them build that. And it doesn't always go your way, right? But it's part of the risks that you have to take.
Well, it's a couple cards ago, Joe Hicks loses to Wendy Toussaint. That's a fighter. So you throw guys in, and if they don't win, they don't win. Our guy Harry in the chat, guys, I'm suffering from mental health. I'm 19. Any solutions? You know what? I think you just try to put as many good days together as possible. You go 1 into 2, 2 into 3, and I think it's really good, whether you like boxing or there's something, try to find a constructive hobby where you can put a lot of time and try to think about mastery in a craft. And mental health will always be up and down. We're going to get anxiety, we're going to get depression. But really, if you can find something you love and put passion into that, I think that will really help. I'm sure that's an AI comment, but still, that is our true thoughts. And love from Japan. So we got some people listening to the show from Japan. That's Almighty KJ15 letting us know he's tuned in from Japan. So shout out to people tuning in from Japan. Let's go over to OTX Boxing. I'm probably going to have to carry the notes on this one because Dakota probably just caught a little bit. Brian Gorham interesting contender. I'm not sure his ceiling. Great interview, by the way. Really interesting interview. You know, he's just a developmental fighter right now, and I don't mean it in the sense of, oh, he's just that. He's a hidden gem type fighter, been in there. He told me he sparred Shakur Stevenson for the Hobson Conceição fight. See a lot of stuff he liked. He fought a veteran, Yomar Alamo, guy that you and me love. You know, if you're not elite, you don't beat him. That being said, this was a very experience building fight. It's obvious that he is the ticket seller for the card, so he gets top billing. But this kind of felt like the Collazo Fundora fight again. No disrespect to Gorham, where you're seeing a developmental fight, a young fighter getting going. But really, to me, the standout story was WBC Women's Featherweight Champion Tiara Brown returning to action. Saw a little ring rust early, and then she dominates the fight.
Again, aren't we talking about another main event fighter there? It feels like
that's once again, I think that skews my perspective. Is in both of these main event cards, my attention started to wander because it felt like the co-feature fighter, who was a woman, was more polished than the main event fighter. I think for this card, obviously Gorham is from Houston, the card's in Houston. It makes sense to keep his fans there last. And I think he had a great performance. It just looked a little, it's hard when you follow a more refined performance and then you're the main event and you're,
but even beyond refined, right? Deserve it. Like, you know, that's potentially a pound. T.R. Brown's like maybe a pound for pound conversation type of fighter, at least to
like
me.
number 6 to me. Number 6
That's
on
what
the
I'm
win.
saying, bro. Like it doesn't make any sense to continue that you know what I mean?
I get it, bro, but that's what I saw. And then Wesley Fiera upset Giovanni Marquez, which I think was a mild upset. Marquez fighting in Houston. I didn't catch all of this fight, but it was a strange one. You know, it's like, I don't know. With Giovanni Marquez, he's had a couple of close fights. And Ferreira is a guy that my guy Kane Sandoval stopped a few years ago. He's a really good amateur in New York, from what I've been told. And for Marquez, it's like he had some accomplishments in the amateurs, and he has a very famous father. But now's when it gets tough, right? Because now's when you have to, you know, bite down, and you've got one loss on your record, and you're a notable name. Where do you want to go in the sport?
I never worry about that one loss though, brother.
Me neither, but I think maybe we're moving away with it, but I think sometimes for young fighters that grew up in the Floyd era, it does kind of stunt their development. They do kind of question, oh man, I'm not going to be like Floyd. Not saying always, but I'm saying it can happen.
I think there's some truth to what you're saying. I just think that type of that's a fantasy world. Like it doesn't seem like a healthy thing to try to maintain in a young fighter, that like you're the man and nothing bad's ever going to happen, you know?
Once again, this week we have ProBox TV return with another card. They're returning pretty fast. We just had a ProBox TV card. We're back with my guy Najee Lopez taking on your guy Kelvin Hot Sauce Henderson. I believe he's Hot Sauce. Isn't that his nickname? You're like, I have no idea. You're like, I don't even care. I'm gonna actually have to look this up to be factually accurate. I know he fought David Morrell. Yeah. Well, I just want to make sure. But Najee Lopez will be main eventing this fight, and Najee's someone that I believe in. Yeah, he's Hot Sauce, so I remembered that. Hot Sauce Henderson. So Najee Lopez returns. I think the big story of this fight is Najee Lopez was in the running to get an Artur Beterbiev fight. He didn't end up getting it, but the fact that his name was mentioned with an opponent, with a big name fighter like Beterbiev, it boosts his luster. And now he's getting in with a guy who David Morrell had stopped a few years back, but this is a guy that's that fight. Comparable opponent, durable guy. I think the hope going into this fight is that Najee really steps on foot on the gas and separates. Any thoughts from you, Dakota?
You want the message from the performance to be like, that's why Beterbiev didn't want to fight me. You know what I mean? That's kind of the idea. And I just hope there isn't any letdown, because that can happen too, right? Where there's a potential big fight that's coming and then that doesn't work out. And then there's, I couldn't give you a specific example offhand, but we've seen that where a big fight falls through and there's a disappointing performance, so I don't think that's what we're going to get from Najee, but there is always kind of that potential.
Call that athlete depression. You get like a big fight opportunity, and then the guys. But I talked to him last week, and he seems in good spirits. He's focused. He's really, really ready for what's ahead. So I'm
sure he is, because the other way to take it is like, I'm on the right track. They're already starting to put me in those kinds of conversations with the 1A, 1B guy in the division.
So other interesting fights. Here's a good one for you. Is Emiliano Moreno versus Raul the Cougar Garcia. Really, really good fight. Emiliano Moreno, I would say, is one of the more interesting prospects in boxing. Got a little David Benavidez to him. Really big welterweight. Probably Dakota's like, he should be a middleweight with the Dakota School of Weight Cut. But he's really big guy. Been breaking guys down. He's fought Cesar Francis earlier this year. It was a stoppage.
Stop Eric Bonet. That's pretty impressive.
I mean, he's fighting real guys. Now he's going in with Raul Garcia, who a couple of years ago had a fight of the year contender on ProBox. He's fighting tough guys.
He fought Vladimir. He fought our guy Vladimir, right?
Raul? I feel like Vladimir's fought everybody, but let's do some. Yeah,
bro, he did. He lost to Vladimir about a year ago.
Ruiz, which was a big banger of a fight, where I went and got like a $45 pizza for me and my girlfriend, and it was very disappointing. I remember that. I remember when that fight was on. Bro. Yeah, it was like that one was meet me in the back of the Safeway type spot, go behind. Yep. Here it is, super confusing, super expensive, and then it's like, oh, and it's not great. That sucks. And then that was playing. So I mean, that's a fight on this undercard. Then we also have, what else do we have on this card? We got Juan Ma Lopez Jr. will be featured on the card.
What do you think of him, Lukey? What's your first impressions of him?
I've seen him for a while in the Olympics, and I've seen him as a pro to a certain extent. I mean, he's really young in the game. Like, I'm seeing someone where what he's doing doesn't really work at the championship level, but he has explosive power and he can knock guys out. As long as he's getting knockouts, the fans will take to him and he'll be talked about. But I need to see him 2 to 3 years from now in 8 to 10 round fights, because I have questions about his conditioning, but to me right now, there's not much to take away other than he can punch. At times he's vulnerable when punching, but he's a young fighter. And I don't know. I think it could go either way. I think that
he's a lot like his pops, where it kind of goes both ways in a sense. There's highs and there's lows. I see a little more natural hand speed on him than I did with Senior. But his dad is a very heralded champion who had some really exciting fights, but was also very flawed, I'm talking about at the top of the sport, and those flaws would really come out. So it'll be interesting to see what his ceiling is.
Yeah. I mean, I think that I never saw his dad in the way that I watch developmental fights now. I had a life. So it's hard for me to compare, but I just think that there's a lot of pressure and people are going to have hot takes one way or another. And I'm just trying to let until he's fighting guys, like, let's look at this level of opponent. He's fighting Luis Morales, 4-1. That's a good record on paper. Fort Worth, Texas. Okay, we're going to learn a lot in this fight. His one loss is a split decision against a guy in Newark, New Jersey. He's fought basically 1-8, 0-1, 0-7, 1-1. I mean, it's about the level he's been fighting. Some amateur pedigree, but it based back to 2016. He holds a win over Japithli Lamelito. He fought Adrian Playtime Benton, who's probably like the best unsigned boxer currently, or the best boxer no one talks about. I mean, there's something there. It's just like I feel like people are gonna rush to either say he's like the best guy ever or the worst guy ever. And I just want him to like develop, because it's like the thing with prospects, right? They need some time to make mistakes. It's kind of like being in your 20s. You need some time to make mistakes so you can figure out who you are and live the rest of your life happily. So, unless something drastic happens to him, I believe he got dropped or he had a hard fight. Someone like shared a clip with me once, showed it to me on their phone. Like he had a hard fight. I guess I should do research on this, but I believe he had a hard fight rather recently. Let me go into this. Yeah, he had a split decision fight and he was dropped in round 1 against Malik Torres, who was 2-0. But I mean, that at the same time, let's look up Malik Torres. This could be a real guy. He's now 3-1 with 3 KOs. Those KOs come first and third rounds, so his power carries. And
listen, bro, Andre Ward got dropped by Darnell Boone. Like every fighter kind of has that moment that tests their mettle. It's just a part of the process.
First round knockdowns aren't the end of the world to me, because everyone can get knocked down in the first round. That's when someone has a lot of power, and that's like a learning experience. So, I mean, I'm not as phased, but he'll be an interesting character to watch this weekend. Our guy Anthony Cuba taking on Jorge de Jesus. That's a battle of one-loss fighters. Jorge de Jesus is coming off of a fairly decent win. Let me look up who it was. Levante Early, who was an undefeated prospect. And Cuba's coming off a win over to Michael Harris, where I was at the fight in February. Kevin Anton is taking on a former Vladimir Hernandez opponent, Isaias Lucero, which was like a fight of the year type fight in like March, I want to say. I was there at that fight. Anton is like possibly Fundora Part 2, 6'3" southpaw, making 154, pressure fighter. That could be a really, really fun fight. And that's what I'm seeing on this card. So those are like the standout fights on the ProBox card.
Love me a little ProBox, bro. I'll definitely be tuned into this one.
And then, unless I am missing something, Soul Kudos said perfect.
I can't tell you that I know Soul Kudos.
Soul Kudos is the, let's see, she is the
sick-ass name,
IBF 105-pound champion. She's going to be going to Kim Clavel's Canada to fight Kim Clavel in a world title fight. Kim Clavel also just recently signed with MVP, Most Valuable Promotions. And Kim Clavel is an interesting figure because she kind of rose to fame. She's a nurse who went back to the front lines during COVID, and she can fight. But she had a stretch of losses, I remember, and she kind of disappeared. And she doesn't always do great with pressure fighters. So one would tell you that one would assume, and you never want to assume, Clavel versus like a Valle is a fantastic fight. And if Clavel could win this fight, that kind of sets the stage maybe for a Yoka fight in the future. But I've never seen Kudos fight, so I have no clue how to assess this fight. What's your level of excitement?
I'm interested mostly because I haven't seen a lot of Kim Clavel either, and I think that having her in that MVP stable is definitely going to be helpful, because I've been hearing about her name for years. It's just her fights have not always been accessible in the same way. So I'm looking forward to seeing her. By the way, one of those losses being to Evelyn Bermudez, who we were
the
just
other ones to
about.
Jessica Neri Plata, who, by the way, I believe just Jessica Neri Plata, who's like another one of these really, really tough.
She's a tough
fighter. So it's like her losses are to like the real people. So I mean, it's, I think that should be a good night for Kim. And then notables on the undercard, your guy Hendry Cedeno will be featured on the undercard. He's in with a guy who's 19-11-2. So given his power, we might see a stoppage. Kind of a sneaky good one based on records. Don't know a ton. Is Amanda Galley taking on Alondra Yamil Hernandez Mendoza. That's a bantamweight bout. That looks like it's fairly evenly matched. Yoka Valle's sister, Naomi Valle, the pilot, taking on Frederica Marciri. That's a battle of undefeateds. I think the star of the undercard, in my opinion, is Tam Theobald, because it's like when you watch that fight between Kay Scott and Olivia Curry, you just think Tam Theobald has to be rubbing her hands together going, I want to fight both of these fighters, because she really feels like she's probably the best women's middleweight fighter in like 3 fights almost. And I would expect, coming off of like that performance, that world title fight, the way that looked, talk about Naji Lopez wanting to make a statement. I think she's going to want to come into this fight and make a statement saying, I am the best fighter. I want people to talk about me. So I would say she's going to be there. Olympic heavyweight, Neville Tiaflak. I remember seeing him in the Olympics. And Javon Wana Walton will also be on this undercard. It's not the most scintillating undercard, but it is there.
It certainly is there. And I think, like you said, I think that Tam, she's only had a couple of fights. We don't entirely know what the ceiling is, but like on all the visuals, all the eye test stuff, she's sort of checking every single box you could want her to check. And I think it's just about kind of gradually moving her in that direction. But she seems like an easy fast track, at least for me.
She's an Olympian. She has deep amateur pedigree. The way she's setting up stoppages, I think that if she's rated, she could fight in a title fight her next fight. She just looks the part of championship boxing. And I think that her versus Shadeja is the fight in the future, because it's like her, Shadeja, and Clarissa all probably have to fight each other at some point, given the lack of depth in these divisions.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that there's like, the Maricela Cornejo and that kind of level of fight that she still hasn't gotten through, at least as far as I can remember. So I'm looking forward to seeing how she does at those levels.
I mean, in theory, this could be that fight, because she's fighting a 1-0 Italian fighter.
I don't think it is, Bob, because experience matters. You need somebody that's kind of seen some things,
Yeah, I mean, it's the problem is, it's like with, like, you bring up Cornejo, she recently lost to Natasha Spence. So it's like, even those people that would give you that look, they don't have longevity in the division. And I think that's kind of the problem at times with women's boxing, is we have some amazing, it's kind of like Finito Lopez's issue when he fought. It's like you have some really outstanding fighters, but then you also have to be reasonable and go, okay, the depth, the talent pool just isn't here. It's like pro golf in like the 60s. The joke is some guys won against firefighters and law enforcement because they'd entered the pro golf tournaments too. It feels like, some of these lower weight male divisions and some of these higher weight women's divisions just lack that thing where, like, Tam Theobald, if she, was competing in men's middleweight, she'd get those looks. In women's, she just has to jump into the contender and title fights because that's the best avenue for
That's
her.
what's available.
Yeah, she can't really do it. I mean, I would expect her to stop this tier of opponent probably.
I think so. And if not, I would kind of expect like a shutout-ish.
Yeah, I mean, she's moving in the right direction. That is the week of fights. So we've covered everything. And then the following week, once again, pretty slow. And then we get to Boots-Ennis. Big birthday coming up for me. So that's going to be exciting.
Happy birthday, my boy.
Milestone soon. So we might delay the Boots-Ennis show, or we might do the Boots-Ennis show like early. When we do that, we'll let you guys know, but pretty slow. It's like we're hitting that stretch where it's like, okay, we had a big fight week, we had way too many fight cards, and now it's back to what the freak are we doing, bro?
That's the where the sport's at, and particularly, we don't have Top Rank cards, we don't have PBC doing shows regularly. This is just what it is right now, bub. Things are changing.
I guess we can end on that, on this segment of like, how do you see the remainder of the year looking?
I think it looks like this. I think there's a couple more big events, and largely, hopefully we can continue to get the Salita cards and the ProBox cards. But I don't think there's going to be, not necessarily title level, but fights with the kinds of implications of Crawford Canelo very often.
So I'm going to read to you, just to be boring, the remainder major fights of the year. Like what I deem major fights are, just going through the schedule. These are the big fights. I might miss one or two because this is half-assed research, okay? Boots versus Lima, which, by the way, hot take. We'll get to it.
That's a big fight, bro.
I think it's going to be a hard fight for Boots.
But it's not a big fight. Like, it's Boots coming back and being active and fighting for the first time at 154, but all the talent at that weight class, and they couldn't find somebody in the top 15 that has a little bit more notoriety.
I'm telling you, Dakota, this is going to be a hard fight for Boots. This is going to be
all the more reason that was a silly move.
Yeah, it's a 12-round decision that people are going to wonder about his trajectory. Then we got Joseph Parker, Fabio Wardley at the end of October. That same day, we have Thurman, Fundora, Shock, Foster, Fulton. Then November 8th, we've got Virgil Ortiz, Erickson, Lubin. Then we got Jake Paul, Gervonta Davis, which now got moved to Miami. Then we got the super card, David Benavidez, Anthony Yard with Haney and a bunch of fighters.
I thought Virgil and Lubin was going to be on that card. Was that ever a thing, or did I make that up?
That's November 8th in Texas.
I got you.
So that's gonna be a separate. And there's a positive to that, right? Is Boots and Virgil are fighting at around the same time. So in theory, they could return at the same point, right? Because Boots is fighting October 11th, Virgil's fighting November 8th. They both would, like, in theory, return around maybe May, They both could get back in camp. The other big one just got announced this week, Naoya Inoue versus Alan Picasso, and then like a bunch of other really good fighters like Junto Nakatani will be on that card. Those are our like big marquee cards that have been announced.
Yeah, there's not a ton of fights with top 10 guys matching up right now. That's just not what's happening. There's good developmental cards. There's good even, prospect and even a contender fights on some of these ProBox cards, but you're not seeing guys in the top 10, 15 getting in with each other on a regular basis.
Yep. So that's that. So thank you to everyone that joined the chat. Dakota, how can people support you this week?
You can always support me at the Lukey Boxing Show. I'm here every week. You can support me at the Slip and Weed Podcast or ITR Boxing on YouTube and Instagram. I guess a cool way of closing it is last minute I somehow slid into that Sony Hall card where Kurt Scobie got the decision over Alex Martin. It was a good performance, I would say. But yeah, you can always follow my coverage when I get to go to fights locally here in New York. I love supporting local boxing.
Any big takeaways from that fight? Anybody that you saw that could go to the next level?
I mean, I think Kurt's got some good things, man. Sometimes he's a little one and done for me. It's like sitting down on one good one. He did start throwing more combinations as the fight went on, and I liked how he kind of got going downhill. But there are some limitations. Like he kind of reminds me of Nova, where there's things I like, but there's things where it's just I think against a certain type of guy, it's just not going to be quite enough. But I think that also can be developed.
Good point.
I think the other takeaway for me was it was really interesting to watch George Arias kind of struggle with Earl Newman. And you got the ambulance and fire truck caravan going down my street right now, so my apologies. But I thought that might be like a levels fight, and I know Earl's a tricky guy, but he's not a guy that's a heavyweight really. He's just a heavyweight in the last couple of years. I would love to know how or why that happened too, but I thought it would be more of a levels fight, and Arias really kind of struggled with that one.
Yeah, well, that's Dakota. He'll be back next week. We'll be breaking down the fights, and then we only have one fight the following week. Well, really two. Cecilia Brækhus comes back, and a 360 Boxing Promotions card, which is a lot of fun, but Dakota doesn't always get to see because they're on UFC Fight Pass, and he doesn't watch that one even. Yeah, so that is next week. It is going to be a lot of fun, and we are done for today. Thank you for sticking with us.